There's a thin line separating regulation and censorship, and the sense of the erosion of free speech in the UK, acknowledging the problem without endorsing JD Vance's hyperbolic claims in his speech. Free speech in the United Kingdom, I don't think it is dead, but it's certainly being tested. And while Britain doesn't have the absolutist First Amendment protections of the United States, its long-standing commitment to open discourse is under increasing strain. And recent legislation, particularly the Online Safety Act, spearheaded by people like Nadine Dorries, is a patchwork of absurdity. And it's ignited concerns about the criminalisation of certain types of speech, with over 292 people charged since October 2023 for online communications offences. Yet, while figures like JD Vance and Elon Musk decry Britain as a dystopian censorship state, their analysis is simplistic and, I think, faulty, and the threat to free speech, nevertheless, is real, but it's not the Orwellian nightmare that American conservatives depict. The Online Safety Act, passed under Rishi Sunak's government, was designed to make the internet safer. It introduced criminal penalties for cyber flashing, revenge porn, online harassment, disinformation that causes non-trivial harm. The last category is the most controversial. The idea of banning false communication or so-called fake news is inherently problematic. And who decides what is false, and how does one prove intent? As a rule, things only appear to be false or fake with hindsight. Lord Toby Young of the Free Speech Union argues that the offence empowers the state to decide what is and what isn't true, which is not so much censorship as tyranny. It echoes concerns that Britain has entered an era of speech crimes. The Southport riots, triggered by the stabbing incident, led to the first convictions under the new legislation, and several individuals were arrested for spreading disinformation, including one who falsely claimed that the attacker was an immigrant. And that information, of course, was spread by people in the elite political environment as well. And I don't need to suggest exactly who they are, relying on fake news spreaders like Tate and Tommy Robinson. And while some argue that this is a necessary step to curb incitement, others worry that it criminalises speech rather than action. And if a false claim about a crime is punishable by imprisonment, does this mean that journalistic errors, satire, or political hyperbole are next? That comedy is next? The case of Dimitri Stoica is particularly troubling. He was jailed for 3 months for a joke live stream in which he falsely claimed he was fleeing rioters in Derby. A foolish act, certainly, but a jailable offence. The criminalisation of stupidity sets a dangerous precedent. The government argues that these laws prevent real-world harm, particularly in an era of online radicalisation, electoral interference and viral misinformation. But legal experts like Daniel Hardstuff notes that proving intent in such cases is difficult. The law's vague phrasing targeting speech that causes non-trivial psychological distress could mean that even legitimate criticism, satire or political speech could be penalised. It's not, therefore, theoretical. British police have already investigated journalists, activists, ordinary people for online speech. Alison Pearson, the journalist, was reportedly investigated for non-crime hate incidents, though the police refused to disclose the content of her post. Julia Sweeney, the 53-year-old grandmother who was jailed for 15 months for a social media post. The rise of hate crime investigations into political and religious speech has led to police knocking on the door incidents over offensive tweets. Is this a better society or merely a more policed society? Is this a society where censorship has taken hold? Is the UK, in fact, becoming a surveillance state? Technology giants like Musk's Twitter have raised the UK's regulatory approach as something to be criticised, arguing that it places tech companies in the role of censors. And the Online Safety Act requires platforms to remove offensive posts or face huge fines, a policy that has led to preemptive over-censorship. Even supporters of online safety laws have questioned whether this creates an environment where private corporations act as moral arbiters, deciding what Britons can and cannot say online. Meanwhile, in real-world policing, free speech concerns have also grown. Street preachers have been arrested for their views on abortion and LGBTQ rights. People have been investigated for silently praying near abortion clinics. I have problems with the silent prayer. In principle, I don't think prayer should be penalised. In practice, prayer can be weaponised. These incidents, which, while isolated, raise an increasingly intolerant attitude towards dissent. As for the JD Vance hypocrisy, free speech and political opportunism, this is where we must resist the false prophets of free speech absolutism. JD Vance, this Trump light, this Trump acolyte, is using this Trump vice president, is using the UK's speech restrictions as a convenient cudgel to attack the European model of governance. So let's not forget that Vance is part of an administration that has threatened mass censorship of universities that discuss racial history, has pushed for banning books on gender and race in school, has encouraged lawsuits against media organisations that criticise Trump. I don't see that Vance is in a position to champion free speech with that baggage. While he rails against Britain's erosion of free speech, he brings to a movement that calls journalists enemies of the people and seeks to criminalise protest. He is part of that crowd. Let's be clear, JD Vance is not concerned with British free speech. He's concerned about weaponising the issue to score points in a populist culture war. Britain does have a free speech problem, but not the Soviet-style tyranny that Vance, Musk and Trump would have us believe. We have to recognise the danger of these vague speech laws, particularly those criminalising false information and offensive speech. We need to ensure that laws focus on harm, not punishing words. We need to resist the knee-jerk reactions from both the authoritarian left and the reactionary right. And the UK is not Orwell's Airstrip 1, but we are inching towards a world where speech is policed with an uncomfortable level of zeal. And the challenge ahead is not simply defending free speech, but doing so without descending into an American-style political hysteria. Free speech must be protected, but it mustn't be hijacked. So, yes, Britain is flirting with an overreach on speech laws, but not in this dystopian way that Vance and his allies claim. It's crucial that we must address these laws without being co-opted by those who see free speech not as a principle but as a political tool, as a political cudgel. So let's do what Britain does best. Let's argue, let's debate, let's scrutinise, and above all, let's speak freely. But let's do so with nuance, not with alarmism.